Hey, there's Niko's back, and this time I want to talk about testing and Keycloak, integration testing and Keycloak, and that it's easier than you expect and what most of you are doing wrong. So stay tuned and listen. Most of the times when it comes to testing with Keycloak, most of you are talking about integration testing. And I say, perhaps you don't do integration testing, but you do integrated tests or integrated testing. So what's the difference? They both sound very similar. Integration tests, integrated tests. So let me show you something. I have an application. That's the one I created with my Quarkus Keycloak tutorial. I'll link the video in the description and also up here. And I have some endpoints which are secured with roles, so I need an access token to access these endpoints and to use them. So I have written some tests in my Quarkus application, and I can get an access token from my Keycloak server, and the Keycloak server itself is located at localhost 8080. It's an external system, so not integrated in the application. And I can run these tests. They will get an access token, execute the call to the secured endpoint, and if I will do this, the test will start and will be executed. And after some seconds, everything's green. All tests have passed. So there is no Keycloak server in the background, of course. And what happens if I now kill this Keycloak server? I'm stopping it. And finally, quitting the console. So there's no Keycloak server at all. And if I now repeat these tests, what will happen? Of course, these tests will fail because there is no Keycloak server at the environment available. So that's what I say. That's not an integration test. That's an integrated test. How do I come to these differences? So if you take a look at a blog post of J.B. Rainsberger, a well-known coach for getting the best out of your development experience, testing, software delivery, and so on. He already wrote a blog post in 2009, so that's from today, 12 years ago, about integrated tests are a scam. And a bit below, there is a term which I do make it a bit bigger. I use the term integrated test to mean any test whose result, pass or fail, depends on the correctness of the implementation of more than one piece of non-trivial behavior. So that's exactly what we experienced as we switched off the Keycloak server at the environment, at the network. So our test will pass if there's a Keycloak server available, and it will fail if there's no Keycloak server. Or if the Keycloak server is available but is configured differently because our colleague has made a configuration change or whatever, our tests are dependent on the correctness of an external system which is not under our control. And that's an integrated test. So switch back. And also Spotify did a blog post 3 years ago, 2018, testing of microservices, why they do testing and how do they do testing. And they also have a differentiation between integrated tests and integration tests. They are referring also J.B. Rainsberger, the integrated tests are a scam blog post. By the way, I put the links to these posts into the video description, of course, so you can read the blog posts. They have some signs of having integrated tests. So we spin up another service in a local testing environment. That's what we do. We spin up a Keycloak server for our local testing environment, but it's not under our control. We test against other services in a shared testing environment. So this Keycloak server might be shared. Other people might use it, might reconfigure it, might change it, might break it. Changes to our system breaks tests for other systems. So even if we adjust the Keycloak settings for our tests, other tests might fail of our colleagues. That's not a good idea. And that's the difference between integrated tests and integration tests. What we want to have are integration tests, not integrated tests. We want to have tests which are testing the integration with another system, the communication, the integration, whatever. And this external system should only be available for us in the correct configuration for our purposes. So how to do it? A few years ago, some guys started the Testcontainers project. So Testcontainers is a Java library that supports JUnit tests, providing lightweight and throwaway instances of anything that can be run in a Docker container. And this can be anything, mostly databases, but also Keycloak. So, and when we have a look at the homepage, that's the Testcontainers and the pretty awesome Testcontainers logo. Testcontainers comes with already some modules, Elasticsearch, Gcloud, Kafka, Local Stack, Mock Server, Nginx, and a lot of databases, plain JDBC, Cockroach, Couchbase, ClickHost DB2, whatever, MS SQL, MySQL, Oracle XE, Postgres, all the well-known databases. Unfortunately or fortunately, there was no Keycloak container for Testcontainers available, and so I created the project Testcontainers-Keycloak. But if you don't have any clue what is Testcontainers, and if you want to know about more about Testcontainers, I recommend you the video, the talk of Kevin Wittek, who is a contributor of the project, and I'll link the video in the description, which you currently can see. And I started the project Testcontainers-Keycloak, which provide a test container for Keycloak, which you can use in your integration tests or unit tests or whatever you want to use. And so you have a single instance of a Keycloak available for your tests only, which can be configured in the way you like. So the Testcontainers-Keycloak project, I started in the end of 2019 already, and it's pretty easy. If you use JUnit 5, for example, you have the container annotation and then can create a new Keycloak container. And with the help of the container annotation, the Testcontainers extension will start the container prior to your tests and stopping the container after executing your tests. And there are some options to use. And you can also use the Keycloak container and import a Realm file which you exported in another Keycloak instance, for example. So you can configure your Keycloak clients and users as you like in another system, export the Realm file, and use this Realm file to import for your Keycloak tests and have the proper configuration, so you don't have to do anything programmatically. And you can also use some admin users, username, password settings. And then, that's pretty important, you can get some information out of the started container, because test containers are starting the test container on a random port. So if you used to use Keycloak on whatever host port 8080, you can't access the test container on a certain port, which you define in advance. So every start of a test container will allocate a random port, and you have to get this information from the container after it is started. And for this, I provided the get auth server URL method, and from there I will get a URL with the host name and the port where the Keycloak server is running. And also I can get the username password if I don't set them in advance. I get the predefined settings. And with these settings, I can, for example, use the Keycloak builder to build a admin access or whatever access to the Keycloak server. And of course, there's also usage of TLS possible, because most of the times you're accessing the Keycloak server via TLS only, HTTPS only. And so also this is supporting the test container. And in case you're developing extensions for Keycloak, you also can test your extensions with the Keycloak Testcontainer. And yeah, all this is available at Maven Central. Of course, you don't have to compile it on your own. You can just use a dependency in your Maven file or Gradle or whatever you're using, and you can get it from Maven Central. And yeah, currently version 1.6. So let's see how we can integrate it or use it. So I provide the simple Keycloak test. This simple Keycloak test is annotated with the test containers. That's an annotation from the test containers framework. Or by the way, I put, of course, the test containers Keycloak dependency to my POM, so that's available. And then I can use the test containers annotation for my test, so that JUnit is aware that we have to load the test containers extension. And then I can define my Keycloak container with the add container annotation. This is all JUnit 5. If you use JUnit 4 still, there are other ways to use it. Please refer the documentation of test containers about how to do this. And yeah, the Keycloak container. And I'm using the Keycloak container with my Quarkus realm JSON, and I exported this realm in advance, and I put it to the class path of my tests. And this is just a regular Quarkus realm file, and this is annotated with add container, so the container will be started before the test and will be stopped after the test has finished. And then I write just a regular test. I can assert if Keycloak, the container, is running, and then access the container, get the auth server URL from the container, and execute the test actually. So that's all I have to do. And yeah, then I can start the test, run the test. This will take some time because the Keycloak container will have to be started in the background. And as you know, starting Keycloak is not the fastest thing to do, so we have to wait a few seconds. So test is finished, the screen was successful. And as you can see, I've printed out the auth server URL from the Keycloak server, and afterwards the access token. And we can see here, that's the auth server URL. And we have a random port, which is 55002 in my case, /auth, where the Keycloak server is available for the tests. Now, after the test is finished, the Keycloak container is stopped again, and that's the access token, so we can see the request was successful. So we can also copy this access token and call the .io website to verify what's in the token. Let's make it a bit bigger. And we will see the issuer of our token is localhost 55002 auth realms Quarkus, which was the test instance of our unit test. So that's very easy to spin up a Keycloak container instance for your tests in your unit test class, and to have a dedicated Keycloak instance running for your tests, not depending on external systems which are not under your control. So you have a real integration test. But what if you want to do this in a complete integration test of your application, like the Spring application or your Quarkus application, where you not do regular unit tests, but do integration tests with the application context running. So I will show you this by an example of Quarkus. It's also possible with Spring. And I will put the links to both resources to the video description, but they are also mentioned in the README of the Testcontainers-Keycloak repository on GitHub. So to our IDE back again. For Quarkus, if I run my test, as we saw, if I want to run my test and I don't have a Keycloak server running, the test will fail because the application can't start. This is what is described here. OpenID Connect server is not available at the URL localhost 8080. It's not available because we configured localhost 8080 on our application properties with the auth server URL. And if we have a Quarkus test, which is similar to the Spring Boot test, the application context will be started and the application properties will be read and taken into account to start the application context. So when executing the test, the actual test, the application context is already started, and here we can't change anything of the application properties anymore. So for this, Quarkus provides the Quarkus Test Resource Lifecycle Manager, which is an interface which you can implement with the desired resource. And this interface provides you with at least two methods, a start and stop method, and some other which you don't necessarily need to implement, but you have to implement the start and the stop methods. And these methods will be executed before powering up, before starting the application context for the test. So I created the Keycloak resource, which implements the Quarkus Test Resource Lifecycle Manager. And in this Keycloak resource, I have the Keycloak container without any annotation, because this is not an actual test. This is just the lifecycle. And this is the Keycloak container. In the start method, I'm starting the Keycloak container, again with the Realm import file. And I can start the container. And then I will return a map of application properties which I want to override before the test application context is starting. So I want to override the Quarkus ORDC auth server URL, which I set to localhost 8080 on my application properties. And for testing, I don't know which is the port, and I will get the auth server URL from the Keycloak Testcontainer, and then I will add it with the needed path to the environment to the application property Quarkus ORDC auth server URL. So the Quarkus application then knows where to access the Keycloak server, the ORDC server. And of course the stop method. In the stop method, I'm checking if there's a Keycloak server, and I will stop the Keycloak server there so that it's powering down and there's no Docker container is running anymore. So with this, I can add this to my test simply with add Quarkus test resource. and I take the Keycloak resource class, and then the Quarkus test knows, oh, there's a test resource I have to execute before I actually start the application context. And then I can run these tests. And I have one thing to adjust, because in my method to getting the access token, I have this secret from my actually running Keycloak server in my environment. I don't want this ID to use this secret. In my JSON file, in my realm JSON file, I have set the secret to the word secret, so that I don't have to handle with any IDs. So where is it? So here it is. It's the client ID, it's Quarkus service, and the secret is secret. So I can use this secret. I can hard code it here because it's my environment and I can control, and I am not dependent on my colleagues or somebody else. And now I can try to rerun the test. And again, it will take some time in advance because the container has to be started, and the application context will wait until the container is started, and then it will execute the test. So, finished. Everything's green, worked, and as you can see, there's some log output from the Testcontainers framework, and starting some Docker containers, which you can see with the Docker icon, and creating container for image Keycloak, and here listening to waiting for the 55005 auth URL, and you can see in the last execution we had another port, and now if we execute it again, the test container, it will get another random port. So every execution is another random port. You can't rely on any ports, and that's also the idea behind to not having a fixed port. So you don't rely on any free ports on your machine or whatever. So the best free port on your environment and your machine where the container is running will be allocated. And if the port 55,000 will be allocated on your Jenkins or your CI server, then of course another port will be allocated. So Keycloak is starting, waiting for maximum 120 seconds, or when the URL is available. That's the default. And then you can see Quarkus is starting. Quarkus now took some time because the Keycloak server has to be started, and the tests will be executed, and then again Quarkus will be stopped after executing the tests. So everything's good, everything's green, tests were succeeded. Now you know the difference between integration tests and integrated tests. Hopefully you won't do any integrated tests anymore and do integration tests the right way with the test containers. So not only Keycloak Testcontainers is available, but also other systems like databases and other things, web servers, WebDriver, Selenium, all the things. Check it out, please. Do integration tests the right way. I also know from some big companies using test containers, and especially Testcontainers-Keycloak for testing their Keycloak environment. So hopefully you will do also in the future. And it's available free of charge at Maven Central. Just integrate it as a dependency and use it. Do it. And if you want to do me a favor, give me some honor of my work, just go to the GitHub page and press the sponsor button where there's a PayPal link where you can send me some money, but that's up to you. What's of course free of charge, doesn't cost any penny, but it's the currency of YouTube. Give me some thumbs up for this video, subscribing to my channel. I will appreciate this. and say thank you for watching this video. See you next time. Stay healthy. Bye bye.